G'day and welcome to another video on my channel. A little while ago I had to go on a trip for my work to a place in Australia where not even that many Australians have been. I've been there once before. I'm talking about Thursday Island up in the Torres Strait. I went there about 30 something years ago. I drove my old FJ45 Land Cruiser around Australia, and as part of that trip I drove up to Cape York and went by ferry over to Thursday Island. But it was a very different trip this time. I flew up there from where I live here in southeast Queensland to Cairns and then to Thursday Island, and did a little bit of flying around when I was up there as well. So I thought I'd just post a little video about Thursday Island and the Torres Strait. Largely for those of you who aren't Australian, you've probably never even heard of it. But even a lot of Australians, although they know where it is, will never have been there, so you might find it interesting.
Alright, just to start off, we'll give you a bit of a rundown of where we're talking about. So here's Australia, this is Queensland. I live down here in southeast Queensland. Here we've got Papua New Guinea up here, and so this is the northern point. This is Cape York, which is the northernmost point of the Australian mainland. It's about 150 kilometres across there to Papua New Guinea, and that body of water through here, just through this area here, is called the Torres Strait. The Torres Strait Islands are made up of about 400 islands, of which I must have a look and see how many are inhabited, but only a small proportion. It's made up of 5, or considered to be 5 major island groups. There's the southern group here. I'll show you, we'll go a bit closer into the names of the islands in a while. We've got the western group here. We've got the northern group here. Now, as an aside, if you ask what is the northernmost point of Australia, and probably most Australians would say, oh, that's Cape York, which is here. But that's not true. The northernmost point of Australia is actually this point here. But this is Boigu Island. This is one of the Torres Strait Islands. This island is actually part of Australia, part of Queensland. And the northernmost point of that island is actually the northernmost point of Australia. So that's something that most people don't know. So this island, Saibai, is also part of Australia. However, this one over here, Daru, that's actually part of Papua New Guinea. So then there's the central group, which is these few here. And then there's the eastern group, which is 3 main islands. You'll notice these have 2 names, Darnley Island, Erub. So Erub is the original islander name for the island, and Darnley was the name that was given by European British colonists. But there's, like a lot of other Australian Aboriginal names, there's a move to change the names back to using the indigenous names. This most eastern island is Murray Island. The traditional name is Mer. These islanders in the eastern islands, beautiful islands. I'll grab a photo in a second and I'll put that up, show you what they look like. Look at this Murray Island. It's a little dot out in the... We've lost it here now. There it is there. Little dot out in the middle of the Coral Sea. Populated by its original inhabitants. They're Australians, and just like me, they're Queenslanders. Yet they live an traditional lifestyle out on their little island out in the ocean. I can't mention Murray Island or Mer without mentioning its most famous person who came from there. And this is this gentleman on the left. His name is Mabo. Now, most Australians are going to recognise his name. He was an Indigenous land rights campaigner, and he campaigned against the concept of terra nullius. That's a legal concept which says that when the Europeans first came to Australia, the land was unoccupied, despite the fact that it was, every part of it had Aboriginal people living on it. And he took it all the way to the High Court, and unfortunately a decision was made, but not until 5 months after his death in 1992, and the concept of terra nullius was quashed, which means that all land in Australia was occupied by Indigenous people and was subject to native title claims, and that's a process which has been going on to this day. So the day of that decision is now celebrated by Indigenous people. It's known as Mabo Day. The islands of the Torres Strait have been populated by Indigenous people for, it's thought, up to 70,000 years, when humans moved across the Indonesian archipelago and New Guinea island. The people of the Torres Strait are known as Torres Strait Islanders. So Indigenous Australians are either Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people, although there is a bit of a mix in the Torres Strait. The traditional owners of the southern group, or often called the near western group, which is the main islands nearest the Australian coastline, and includes Thursday Island, which is the main town in the Torres Strait, consider themselves Aboriginal people, the Karareg Aboriginal people, and the actual traditional name for Thursday Island was Waiben. As you'll see in the map, there's a group of islands all quite close together, and so these people are the traditional owners of those islands. And as I just alluded to, the Torres Strait Islanders in general are largely Melanesian people. They are closely related to the peoples of Papua New Guinea and the Pacific. Early photos of Torres Strait Islanders often show these distinctive ceremonial headdresses, and they're still often used today in ceremonial dances. This is a photo of people on Thursday Island celebrating Mabo Day. Now on the right we've got the Aboriginal flag, and on the left we have the flag of the Torres Strait Islands. This distinctive symbol on the Torres Strait Island flag is representative of the ceremonial headdress that I showed you previously. The first European to navigate the Torres Strait was Luis de Torres. He was a Spanish navigator who sailed across the Pacific and through the Torres Strait to the Philippines in 1606. And of course it's from him that the name Torres Strait comes from. In 1770, on his first voyage, English explorer James Cook explored and charted the east coast of Australia. On the 21st of August 1770, he rounded Cape York and entered the Torres Strait, and he actually named Cape York. So travelling up here, he rounded the Cape, named Cape York, and then if you look at this little island, this long shaped island here, the Endeavour anchored off this island, and then on the 22nd of August they came ashore on the island, and James Cook and his men held a ceremony where he formally took possession of the east coast of Australia for the British Crown, and at the same time he named the island Possession Island. In 1847, Captain Owen Stanley of the Royal Navy, who commanded the naval survey ship, the HMS Rattlesnake, was tasked with surveying the coastline of New Guinea. He sailed up the east coast of Australia and rounded Cape York, actually surveyed the southwestern group of the Torres Strait Islands. So he stopped at Wednesday Island. Obviously it was on a Wednesday, which is why he named it that. I think he named all these islands as he was sailing here, but he got to this island here on Thursday. So they obviously landed there, and then they sailed through this strait here to this island here and named it Friday Island. Now, as you can see, the names are swapped around now, because when he sent his charts to the Admiralty for them to actually publish navigational charts, they thought that it made no sense that Wednesday, it went Wednesday, Friday, Thursday Island, so they actually changed the name of these two islands and named it, this one, what he'd named Thursday became Friday, and what was Friday became Thursday. So we now have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday Island, and that's where they get their names. Due to the fears of Russian expansionism in the 1880s, in the early 1890s it was decided to build a fort on Thursday Island. It was built on the highest point of the island, which is known as Green Hill. This is a view of Green Hill facing west, so facing through the Torres Strait out to the west towards Indonesia. This is just the tip of the large Prince of Wales Island here. This is Friday Island here, and you can see the edge of Goods Island over there. The fort was built between 1891 and 1893. It was actually paid for by the colonial governments of Western Australia, South Australia, Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland. So they obviously feared a invasion, and because of its strategic value, it was decided to put a fort here. Now it was armed with these large Armstrong guns. They were actually supplied by Britain. Britain supplied the guns and the ammunition. And then once it was built, Queensland actually garrisoned and supplied the fort. So the fort was made up of these ramparts with several large Armstrong guns, and all facing to the west northwest. It was garrisoned from its completion in 1893 right through to 1926. However, it never fired a shot in anger. The fort has a lot of other infrastructure, including magazines, tunnels for moving the shells to the guns, the places where they used to be hoist the shells up to the guns, and also general places for the troops to live and eat and everything else that they needed to do while they were there. The fort's managed by a volunteer group, and you can actually book tours which will take you through all these parts of the fort, but you're welcome just to go there at any time to see the outside part. In the early 20th century, a major industry developed in the Torres Strait based at Thursday Island. That was pearling. So they had these boats they called pearling luggers, and they would sail around the straits, which was a very good place for large oyster shells, and they would have divers, with the diving suits, go down and bring up this shell, and of course they'd find pearls, but the main reason was for the shell for use in buttons in Europe. This industry was largely controlled by Europeans. However, it was a very dangerous and hard job being a pearl diver, and so they imported people from Asian countries, mainly Japan and the Philippines, who were experienced in diving. This industry went right through the 20th century until about the 1950s, and finally finished in about the 1960s. It was the formation of plastic and plastic buttons which rendered the demand for pearl shells obsolete, which finished the industry. But as I mentioned before, the heritage of this industry is the mixed people who live, especially in the main Thursday Island southwestern group. The people are largely mixed heritage of Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander, Filipino and Japanese and European descent. Here's a photo from the 1960s where there was a couple of the remaining pearl luggers still operating, but there's none there now. In 1938, when war with Japan was becoming a real possibility, it was decided that forward air base was required up here in the Torres Strait. So Horn Island was chosen, and a construction was started on an airbase there. Construction went through until right through the war started, and I think construction continued right through until about 1942. You'll see here the Horn Island Airport. You'll see it's got two runways. These are the original World War II fighter plane runways that were built. They're still in use today. The airfield was a forward operating base, was used by both Australian and American aircraft for operations in the north over New Guinea against the Japanese. Over an 18-month period during 1941 and 42, there was multiple bombing raids on Horn Island and also a lot of the other islands. This is a photo of the airstrip from the air, and you can see the bombing craters all around the airstrip as the Japanese were trying to take out their airstrip. In 1941, the threat to the Torres Strait was being recognised, and a new battalion was raised. It was called the Torres Strait Light Infantry Battalion, and it was almost completely composed of indigenous Torres Strait Islanders, and it was the first and only completely indigenous battalion ever formed by the Australian military. A lot of the outer islands were being bombed by the Japanese sporadically, and so the Torres Strait Light Infantry was tasked with garrisoning all the islands to deter any Japanese landings. There was one contingent was actually sent to Dutch New Guinea, the western part of New Guinea, and fought the Japanese there. This plaque at the airfield on Horn Island is a memorial to those who gave their lives during World War II in the defence of the Torres Strait, and you'll see at the top here we've got the Torres Strait Light Infantry, and you can tell by most of their names. These were local people who were defending their islands. At the bottom here you'll also see quite a few Americans, mainly, who were killed in this area. The main town in the Torres Strait is Thursday Island, which is generally locally colloquially known as TI. Today Thursday Island is pretty much a typical northern Australian town. It has most of the services you require, although it is more remote than most places because it's not accessible by road. There's a barge comes up from Cairns to Horn Island several times a week, I think, and so basically everything that needs to come up generally comes up on the barge. Either that or some things can be brought up by truck on up the road to Bamaga, and then just come across on the barge from Bamaga across to Thursday Island. But as you'd expect, everything up here is much more expensive than anywhere else. While I was up in the Torres Strait, I had to do a trip in a fixed-wing aircraft, so this is taking off on the Horn Island airstrip, heading north-east, and the pilot was nice enough to actually do a full 360 circuit around the island so I could do some filming before we head off. So as you can see, once we get a little bit higher, there's basically the airstrip and the little settlement on Horn Island. There's also a water reservoir and a treatment works, but there's not much else there. The rest of it's just bush. Over there in the distance to the north you can see Wednesday Island. Now we're going to just bank around do a sort of basically 180 and head back over Thursday Island. So now we're heading back west towards Thursday Island. So over here we can see Horn Island. There's the little settlement. There's just the end of the runway there. So this is Thursday Island. The biggest one is this great big one here is Prince of Wales. There's pretty much nothing there. It's just bush. There's a few people live around the edges, but yeah, it's just bush. Thursday Island was the main settlement, I think, because it had water on there when they originally settled the islands. There's the airstrip there. They settled the islands, and Thursday was the central island, probably the most sheltered one, I guess, too. But it also had water on it. So this one just to the right down here, that's Hammond Island. That's only just a short distance across. There's a settlement there too. People live there, and they come across by there's a water taxi, and a lot of people have their own boats. So yes, sort of gives you a look at Thursday Island. So here's the Green Hill Fort over here where we were earlier on. You can see there's a reservoir here. It used to be a popular swimming hole till they got a big crocodile took up residence in there. They did catch it, but no one's going to swim there anymore in case there's another one. Yeah, so here's the main part of town here. There's a couple of wharves. There's a commercial wharf and there's a jetty as well. This is the hospital over here. Between Thursday Island and the little settlement and Horn, there's about 3.5 people live there. Now, in a little while, I'm going to show you some footage of a helicopter flight I took. This is the helipad just here, just down there. So I flew across here, but we'll show you that footage later on. But so here we are, we're flying back over Horn Island, so that's a good view of the airstrip there. While I was up in the Torres Strait, I had to go across to Punsan Bay, which is on the mainland just to the southwest of Cape York, and so we took a helicopter over there, and so this is just taking off from Thursday Island. That's my wife in the front seat. She got the front seat on the way there, I got the front seat on the way back. Just flying over the little settlement of Horn Island. That's Prince of Wales Island, just across the strait there in the distance. So here we are, we're back approaching the Australian mainland. This is Punsan Bay. So it's a little sandy beach bay, just a few kilometres southwest of Cape York. There's a little resort there with a restaurant and caravan park and camping area and accommodation. So looking north on the beach here, Cape York is actually pretty much at the end, as far as you can see at the end of that beach. And as you can see, I was lucky enough to get the front seat on the way back. Looking across to the east here, you can see right across the peninsula, and you can see the Pacific on the other side in the distance. And just coming up here, you can see this long thin island, that's Possession Island. You can see the little white sandy beach at the northern tip. That's where the Endeavour anchored, and the crew came ashore to have their ceremony. There's a memorial plaque on the hill there apparently. Now we're looking over the little settlement on Horn Island and across to Thursday Island there in the middle.
Well, I hope you enjoyed my little travel doc. There wasn't really anything about shooting in there, although I must say I was doing a little bit of research as I was doing this, and I discovered that there is actually a pistol club on Horn Island. It's actually only started, from what I can gather, in the last couple of years. I'll put their web address up in the description, so if you're interested in looking at that. I'll probably be going up there again every now and then, but unfortunately I'll probably be too busy to be able to go pistol shooting while I'm there. I might manage to go and visit them before I catch the plane sometime, you never know. Anyway, if you got this far, you must like this sort of thing, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.